The deficit split squat is a modification that I came up with as a way to work around some of the problems that I frequently see with another variation of this exercise, the Bulgarian split squat. You may very well have heard of or even performed the Bulgarian split squat. It's the one that you might see at a gym where you have your rear foot elevated. I have some strong opinions on the Bulgarian split squat, and I'll do my best to spare you where I can, but fair warning, we're going to have to get in the weeds a bit with this one. In short, Bulgarian split squats can be a great exercise, but it's almost always coached and performed very wrong. And even if it's done correctly, which is exceedingly rare, it's still really only the best choice for people with exceptional hip mobility or very particular athletic demands. The deficit split squat is meant to improve upon what's unfortunately become the standard version of the Bulgarian split squat. You may have never heard of this exercise, and that's fine, but if you have, I bet you picture something like this: rear foot propped up on a bench. The big problem with this setup is that it requires an incredible amount of flexibility in your hip flexors if you want any sort of halfway decent depth. Mobility that I personally do not have, which makes me a good model for why this movement is best left untouched. If you look at the bottom position here, my femur is way back behind me, which means that my hip has to open up way past neutral. If you lack the necessary range, which I do, and you probably do too, one of a few things is likely to happen. First, you might lean way forward to take strain off of your hip flexors, which is not ideal. Or probably even more likely, you have to really hyperextend your lower back to keep upright, which puts a big crimp on that very important area. Even less ideal, potentially even dangerous. True, you can play around with your stance a bit to take pressure off of that back leg, but if you do, let's look at the bottom position of our working leg. This is not ideal. You can see that the front leg is getting to maybe a bit more than a 90-degree angle, and that's frankly just not very good. We wouldn't accept that range of motion for any other squat variation, so I'd posit that it's not good enough here either. One of the advantages of a proper split squat is that you can explore even deeper ranges of motion than you can with most other squat variations, and that just goes completely out the window with this rear foot elevated version. I bet there are a few of you that love your rear foot elevated split squats and aren't terribly happy with me right now, but I'm sorry. You might consider that unless you're a weightlifting coach from Cold War era Eastern Europe, you probably don't know as much about this lift as the guys that actually invented it and used it successfully. And I promise you that they'll tell you the same thing. The way they're usually performed is wrong and not that helpful. The vast majority of the time when I see these, we have a suboptimal range of motion coupled with a potentially dangerous lower back position. Not a great combination. One of the reasons why the split squat has become so popular, at least this version of the split squat, is because it's very booty focused, which is true. So what I wanted to figure out is if there was a way to reap the same benefit of a more glute intensive squat, but remove the negative aspects of the typical rear foot elevation. That's where the deficit split squat comes in. With the deficit split squat, we don't just elevate the rear leg. We elevate both legs and elevate them both to the same height. From here, we sink straight down, which is a bit of a departure from the forward and down nature of the other split squats that you've encountered so far. But let's look at the bottom position here and see what we've accomplished. Firstly, far less strain on that back hip. This is more or less a neutral hip position, the same as just standing upright. So you can perform these without overextending your lower back. Secondly, look at the range in the front leg. By elevating both legs, we allow that back knee to sink down without hitting the floor. See how much depth in both the hip and the knee? Look how this compares to the earlier example of the rear foot elevation. Significantly more depth at both joints. And this is really important for the perceived value of the Bulgarian split squat. If its value is in targeting your posterior, well, your glutes and hamstrings are most active at the deepest ranges of hip and knee flexion. So no depth, no booty. So more depth here means even more effective stimulus for your glutes. And there we have it. That's why we have this particular split squat variation in the rotation. For those of you that stuck with me this whole time, I salute you. I realize we went off the deep end a bit here, and I hope it helped. If you're still not sure, well, let's give the deficit split squat a try and let the exercise speak for itself.